0251 hours. The Strait of Hormuz. 21 miles of water separating the Persian Gulf from the open ocean. And right now the most contested 21 miles on Earth. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Cole, a destroyer running 0.4 miles ahead of the carrier formation. An electronic warfare technician is watching a frequency display that should not look the way it looks. A signal. Hardened high-frequency band. Not Iranian, not commercial. Origin bearing correlates to a surface contact sitting 11 nautical miles off the Iranian coastline, hull number matching a vessel that has no business being in this part of the Gulf. A Russian Vishnya-class intelligence collection ship. Designated the SSV-201 Priazovye. The technician flags the contact and calls the electronic warfare officer. The EWO looks at the signal characteristics for 4 seconds and reaches for the command circuit. What he has just identified is not a coincidence, and it is not a passive observer. The Priazovye has been positioned at that coordinates for 72 hours, running its sensor suite continuously. And for the past 6 hours, it has been doing something that represents a direct escalation of everything the U.S. Fifth Fleet has been managing in this theater. It has been acting as a data relay, a bridge. A way for the Iranian anti-ship missile batteries hidden in the cliff faces above Bandar Abbas to see through the electronic jamming wall that the Fifth Fleet's EA-18G Growlers have been maintaining for the past 4 days. Here is what that means in practical terms. The U.S. Navy's electronic warfare architecture has been systematically blinding Iranian coastal radar since the carrier strike group entered the Gulf. Without functioning radar, Iranian missile batteries cannot generate the targeting solutions they need to launch against the formation. The jamming is not perfect, and it is not permanent, but it is effective enough that the IRGC Coastal Defense Commander has been sitting behind useless radar screens for 4 days, watching his anti-ship missile batteries degrade in tactical relevance with every hour that passes. This was the plan. Blind the coast, move the carriers, control the strait. What the Fifth Fleet did not fully account for was what Russia would do about it. The Priazovye carries a passive sensor suite that operates on entirely different principles than the radar systems being jammed. It does not emit, it listens. Using a combination of thermal imaging, acoustic detection, and signals intelligence collection, the ship tracks the thermal wake signatures and electronic emissions of every vessel in the carrier formation without broadcasting a single watt of energy that the Growlers can find and suppress. It then packages that targeting data into a compressed, frequency-hopping burst transmission and fires it through a hardened uplink to a relay satellite, which delivers it to the Iranian Coastal Command Cell at Bandar Abbas in under 4 seconds. The Iranian missile batteries relying on that feed are no longer blind. They are seeing the carrier formation through Russian eyes, and Russian eyes are currently outside the reach of every jamming system the Fifth Fleet has deployed. It is like being in a room where someone has turned off all the lights and assuming the person across from you cannot see you, only to realize they are wearing night vision equipment you did not know they had. The Iranians are not seeing through the jamming. They are going around it. And the relay link that makes it possible is sitting on a ship flying a Russian flag in international waters, which means every conventional response option the Fifth Fleet has for shutting it down comes with a diplomatic weight that makes it prohibitively expensive to execute, or so the Russian commander of the Priazovye believed. At 0258 hours, 2 EA-18G Growlers operating from the USS Gerald R. Ford reach their assigned orbit point at 31,000 feet above the strait. Their AN/ALQ-99 jamming pods are already active on the Iranian coastal radar frequencies, but the mission tasking that arrived in the cockpit 11 minutes ago is not about the Iranian radar. It is about the Russian uplink. The signals intelligence team aboard the Ford has spent the previous 90 minutes reverse engineering the Priazovye's burst transmission protocol. Not jamming it, reading it. Understanding the exact compression algorithm, the frequency hop sequence, the authentication handshake that makes each packet look legitimate to the Iranian command cell receiving it on the other end. That analysis produced something more useful than a jamming solution. It produced the ability to write new packets. The lead Growler pilot activates a secondary system that the Russian crew of the Priazovye has no knowledge of and no framework to anticipate. The AN/ALQ-218 tactical receiver, operating in a mode that was not in the aircraft's original design specification, but was added through a classified software update 3 years ago, begins inserting fabricated data packets into the Priazovye's uplink stream. The packets are formatted identically to the legitimate targeting data the Russian ship has been transmitting. The authentication codes are valid because they were extracted from the real transmissions during the 90-minute analysis window. The Iranian command cell at Bandar Abbas receives the new packets without any indication that anything has changed. Their displays update. The carrier formation, which is actually holding a position centered roughly here, now appears on their screens to have moved 47 miles to the southwest, placing it in water so shallow that the formation geometry makes no tactical sense. The Iranian targeting solutions built on that data are now worthless. The missile batteries are aimed at empty ocean. The Russian ship is still transmitting. It is now transmitting lies, and it does not know it. Moscow has handed Iran a targeting capability, and the US Navy has quietly turned that capability into a mechanism for feeding the Iranian missile batteries corrupted data without either the Russians or the Iranians detecting the injection. The bold strategic move that was supposed to neutralize the Fifth Fleet's jamming advantage and give Iran a clean targeting picture has become a precision instrument for delivering disinformation directly into the Iranian command network. The Priazovye is not a problem anymore. It is an asset. It is the most reliable channel the Fifth Fleet currently has for telling the Iranian Coastal Defense Commander exactly what the Fifth Fleet wants him to believe. But there are now 3 carrier strike groups in the Gulf, and the geometry of that fact is about to become impossible to hide from Russian satellite coverage regardless of what the Priazovye's sensors report. At 0304 hours, the USS George H.W. Bush completes its transit through the Strait's western approach channel and takes its position in the northern Gulf. The Bush has been running at flank speed from the Atlantic for 11 days, and its arrival transforms the tactical picture from a carrier presence into something that has not been seen in this region since the First Gulf War. 3 nuclear-powered supercarriers operating simultaneously in a single theater. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the USS Abraham Lincoln, the USS George H.W. Bush, 300,000 tons of sovereign American territory, 240 strike aircraft between them, and sensor networks that, when linked through the Cooperative Engagement Capability Architecture, generate a single unified radar and electronic picture covering every square inch of water and airspace from the Strait of Hormuz to the northern Gulf of Oman. There is no gap in that picture. There is no frequency band the formation is not monitoring. There is no vessel in this body of water that does not have a track number and a firing solution already computed against it. The Russian intelligence officers aboard the Priazovye watching the Bush's arrival understand what 3 carriers means. It means that whatever the Priazovye reports to Moscow about the tactical situation in the Gulf, Moscow is now operating with the full understanding that the US has committed enough combat power to this theater to sustain offensive operations indefinitely while simultaneously defending every asset in the formation against any combination of threats Iran can generate. The 3-carrier concentration is not a defensive measure. It is a statement of intent so clear that it requires no translation. At 0311 hours, the IRGC tests the perimeter anyway. A Shahed 136 loitering munition, small radar cross-section, low altitude, launched from a coastal position north of the strait, crosses the exclusion threshold 42 nautical miles out from the lead carrier. It does not receive a warning transmission. The USS Cole's Aegis system detects it on the SPY-6 radar, classifies it in under 2 seconds, and assigns an SM-6 interceptor from the vertical launch system before any human in the Combat Information Center has finished reading the threat summary. The SM-6 is a $4.3 million weapon that travels at Mach 3.5 and carries an active radar seeker that can engage targets from the edge of the atmosphere down to wavetop. Altitude. The Shahed does not reach wavetop altitude. It is intercepted at 19,000 feet. The detonation is clean and total. On the Priazovye sensor displays, the event registers as a brief thermal bloom that disappears in under a second. The Iranian Coastal Command Cell receives notification of the intercept through the Priazovye's relay link, formatted as a standard targeting update, with no indication that the update was generated by the US Navy rather than the Russian crew. The notification tells them their drone failed to penetrate the defensive perimeter and that the carrier formation remains in the position the corrupted data has been reporting, 47 miles southwest of its actual location. The IRGC commander at Bandar Abbas adjusts his planning accordingly. He is adjusting to a fiction. While the electronic architecture of the operation is holding the Iranian response in a paralyzed loop of corrupted information, the kinetic component of the night's objectives is executing 400 miles to the northeast. A flight of Israeli F-35 Ayadir aircraft, 12 of them, has been airborne since 0215 hours, flying a low-altitude penetration route through airspace that the U.S. Fifth Fleet's Growlers have been scrubbing of functional Iranian radar coverage since before the Israeli jets left the ground. The Adirs are not flying blind. They are receiving a continuous targeting feed through a secure Link 16 bridge connected to the E-2D Hawkeye orbiting above the carrier formation, which means the Israeli pilots have the same God's eye view of Iranian airspace that the Fifth Fleet's own aircraft have. Every surface-to-air battery along the penetration route has been mapped. Every radar that is still functioning has been located and is being continuously suppressed. The flight path the Israeli jets are following was not chosen by the pilots. It was generated by the Hawkeye's threat avoidance algorithm and transmitted to the aircraft cockpits as a dynamic routing update that adjusts in real time as the electronic warfare picture changes. The targets are 3 hardened underground facilities in the Zagros mountain range, each one buried under reinforced concrete at depths that make standard air-delivered munitions ineffective. The construction of these facilities was funded through a financial mechanism that routed Iranian oil revenue through 3 intermediary accounts, and the Russian technical equipment installed inside them was shipped under documentation, listing it as components for a civilian desalination project. What is actually inside those facilities is a production line for a maneuvering re-entry vehicle program that Iran has been developing with Russian engineering support for 4 years, and which, if it reaches operational status, will render the current generation of U.S. ballistic missile defense systems operationally insufficient against Iranian long-range strikes. The facilities are not a threat today. In 30 months, they become one. Tonight is the last moment they can be reached before the program moves into a dispersal phase that will make it impossible to target comprehensively. The Adirs release their GBU, 2 8 deep throat penetrator munitions from standoff range, and turn back toward the border before the weapons reach their targets. The GBU, 2 8 carries a 900-kilogram hardened steel penetrator that is designed to punch through reinforced concrete before the main charge detonates. 3 facilities, 12 aircraft. Staggered release timing to ensure the secondary explosions from the first impacts do not compromise the terminal guidance of the following weapons. The results register on regional seismic monitoring networks as 3 separate events in the magnitude 3 range. The Russian technical advisors who were scheduled to begin an equipment certification review at the northernmost facility at 0600 local time will not be conducting that review. The facility no longer has a ceiling. The Priazovye commander is monitoring all of this through his passive sensor suite and reporting back to Moscow in real time. Moscow is receiving accurate information about the Israeli strike and the scale of the damage. What Moscow is not receiving accurate information about is where the U.S. carrier formation actually is, because the Priazovye's targeting data feed is still running the fabricated packet stream the Growlers injected into it 80 minutes ago. The Russian Pacific Fleet Command Cell that is supposed to be using the Priazovye's intelligence to advise on response options is working from a tactical picture that the U.S. Navy wrote. At 0339 hours, the Priazovye commander makes a decision that reflects either considerable courage or a significant miscalculation about what the next few minutes are going to feel like. He orders the ship to increase speed and begin maneuvering toward the carrier formation, apparently calculating that closing the distance will allow his passive sensors to generate a corrected targeting picture that will expose the data injection. He has understood what has happened to his uplink. He wants to fix it by getting close enough that his sensors can see the carriers directly, rather than through the corrupted relay. He gets to within 4 nautical miles of the outer screening destroyers before the USS Cole executes what the formation commander calls a barrier station. The Kol accelerates to flank speed and places itself directly between the Priazovye and the carrier formation, matching the Russian ship's course and holding a position 200 yards off its port bow. The Kol's SPY-6 fire control radar locks onto the Priazovye and holds the lock. It does not fire. It does not need to. A fire control radar lock is the naval equivalent of a loaded weapon being held against the back of someone's head. Every electronic warfare officer on the Russian ship knows what a fire control lock sounds like on their warning receivers. They are hearing it now. The message requires no voice communication. You are 200 yards from a destroyer that has a firing solution on your bridge. Wherever you are going, you have arrived. The Priazovye reduces speed. It does not stop immediately. The Russian commander holds course for 90 seconds, perhaps deciding whether the bluff is worth running. Then the second signal reaches him. A periscope breaks the surface 230 yards off the Priazovye's starboard bow, just the sail, briefly, enough to be visible from the bridge before it submerges again. The Vishnya-class fast attack submarine, USS Minnesota, has been trailing the Priazovye since it entered the Gulf, and it has just communicated its presence in the clearest language available to a submarine. You are being tracked from below as well as above. There is no angle you can maneuver to that we cannot cover. The Priazovye cuts its engines. The ship slows to bare steerage way and holds position. The data uplink to the Iranian coast continues running, still transmitting the fabricated targeting data the Growlers installed in it, because shutting it down would require the Priazovye commander to take an action that would tell the Iranian command cell something has gone wrong, which would tell the Iranians to discount everything the Russian relay has been sending them for the past 90 minutes, which would partially restore their situational awareness. As long as the uplink is running, it is more useful to the Fifth Fleet than it is to the Russians or the Iranians. So the Priazovye keeps broadcasting, and the Iranian missile batteries at Bandar Abbas keep their launchers pointed at 47 miles of empty water. At 0412 hours, the sun is still below the horizon. The strait is quiet. The three carrier strike groups are holding their formation, flight operations continuing on normal schedule. On the Ford's flight deck, the first aircraft of the pre-dawn launch cycle is taking tension on the catapult. On the Priazovye, the Russian crew is conducting a damage assessment of their electronic systems, trying to determine how long the injection has been running and what the scope of the false data delivered to the Iranian command cell actually is. In Bandar Abbas, the IRGC Coastal Defense Commander is receiving a situation report that his targeting picture has been inconsistent with independent observation for the past 90 minutes, and that the Russian data relay that was supposed to give him eyes on the carrier formation has instead been directing his missile batteries at coordinates that contain no military targets of any kind. Now pull back from the timeline and look at the full shape of what just happened, because the individual events tell only part of the story. Russia committed a significant intelligence asset to this theater with a specific strategic objective: to neutralize the U.S. electronic warfare advantage by providing Iran with a targeting capability that operated outside the jamming envelope. That objective was well designed. The Vishnya-class passive sensor suite genuinely cannot be jammed by the systems the Growlers carry. The frequency-hopping burst transmission protocol the Priazovye uses was designed specifically to resist interception and manipulation. The plan had real merit, and it was executed by competent professionals who understood the technical landscape they were operating in. The flaw was not in the technology. The flaw was in the assumption that reading a signal and rewriting it are different levels of difficulty. They are not. The signal's intelligence capability that allowed the Fifth Fleet to reverse engineer the Priazovye's uplink protocol in 90 minutes is not a new system. It has been developed and refined over a decade of operations in exactly this kind of electromagnetic environment. The Russians designed their relay system, assuming the US would try to jam it. What they did not account for was the US having the capability, the patience, and the operational positioning to instead infiltrate it and use it as their own broadcast channel. The Priazovye was not defeated. It was recruited. For 90 critical minutes, it was the most effective instrument of American information warfare operating in the theater, and neither the crew nor the command in Moscow understood that until it was over. The economic accounting of the night is straightforward. Russia invested the operational costs of a Vishnya-class deployment estimated at several $millions for the Gulf transit alone. Plus, the strategic cost of having its most sophisticated signals intelligence platform exposed, analyzed, and defeated in a single operational window. Iran lost 3 underground facilities, representing 4 years of weapons development work and an estimated $300 million in infrastructure and equipment. The U.S. Fifth Fleet expended 2 AMRAAM equivalents in the SM-6 intercept, the flight hours for the Growler and Hawkeye sorties, and a quantity of compressed data that cost nothing to generate and changed everything about how the night concluded. That ratio is not accidental. It is the product of an architecture that was specifically designed to achieve this kind of outcome, where the adversary's investment in hardware is rendered irrelevant, not by matching it with superior hardware, but by operating in the information layer above it, faster than any human decision cycle on the adversary's side can. Respond. By the time the Russian commander on the Priazovye understood what was happening to his uplink, the Israeli strike was complete, the IRGC's targeting data was corrupted beyond use, and the USS Minnesota was already visible off his starboard bow. He was the last person in the theater to understand what had just happened to him. In this kind of warfare, that is the only position that matters. At 0415, the watch rotated on the USS Cole. The outgoing team logged the engagement, flagged the electronic intelligence collected from the Priazovye's uplink for further analysis, and handed off a tactical picture showing 3 carrier strike groups in formation. All systems nominal, no active threats. The incoming watch team took their seats, reviewed the status board, and began their sweep. The Priazovye was still on the display, still holding position 200 yards off the Cole's beam, still transmitting, still lying to Bandar Abbas. The watch supervisor noted the contact, confirmed the fire control lock was still active, and moved on. There are no heroics in this story. There is no single moment of individual genius. There is a system that was built to operate faster than its adversaries can think, and a night in which that system performed exactly as designed, while the adversaries it was built to defeat sat in the dark wondering what happened to the lights. If you want to understand how the information architecture behind this kind of operation actually works, the signals intelligence loop, the data injection capability, the Link 16 integration between US and allied platforms, subscribe. This is the layer of modern naval warfare that no news coverage reaches and no press briefing discloses. And tell me in the comments, if Russia sends 2 Vishnya-class ships next time and staggers their transmission protocols, does the injection attack still work? Think through the geometry before you answer, because the answer depends on something that has nothing to do with how many ships are in the water. The scenario described in this video is a technical and tactical analysis based on real military assets, documented electronic warfare capabilities, and regional tensions. The specific operational sequences are hypothetical dramatizations created to illustrate U.S. Navy integrated information warfare doctrine and Fifth Fleet operational architecture.